All right, let's dive right in. We're going to talk about a huge concept today, freedom. But specifically, we're asking, what does freedom actually mean within Islam? It's a question that can seem, well, a little confusing at first.
And here it is, the question that gets everyone scratching their heads. The word Islam itself literally translates to submission. So, how on earth can submission lead to freedom? It sounds like a total contradiction, doesn't it? But as we're about to find out, the answer is all about flipping our modern idea of freedom completely on its head.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. We'll start by tackling that paradox head on. Then, we'll explore this core idea of spiritual liberation through something called oneness. After that, we'll look at the role of human choice, see how this all fits into society and government, and finally, we'll tie it all together to reframe what true freedom really is. Right, so first up, this paradox of freedom. To really get it, we've got to go back in time a bit and understand the shift from old Bedouin ideals to this new concept of divine submission.
So, picture this, pre-Islamic Arabia. For the Bedouin tribes, freedom was everything. But it was a very external thing, It was about your personal honor, being brave in a fight, having unshakable loyalty to your clan. Islam didn't come along and get rid of the idea of freedom, it completely transformed it from the inside out.
So, how did that massive shift happen? Well, it all comes down to one central core idea, a spiritual principle that takes freedom from something you do out in the world to something you are on the inside.
And this is the key. The concept is called Tawhid. It means the absolute oneness and indivisibility of God. You can think of it as the single most important building block of the entire Islamic worldview. And for our conversation today, it's the launchpad for this totally radical vision of freedom.
You've almost certainly heard this phrase before. It's the Shahada, the declaration of faith. But our source material points out that it's so much more than just a statement. It's actually a declaration of liberation. See, by affirming there is only one ultimate reality worth submitting to, you are simultaneously declaring yourself free from servitude to everything else. Other people's opinions, societal pressures, your own chaotic desires, all of it.
And this has a huge psychological effect. Tawhid, this focus on oneness, helps create a unified, integrated self. The opposite of that is shirk. That's when you associate other things with God, giving them ultimate importance. And when you're serving a dozen different masters, your job, your reputation, your anxieties, you get torn apart. You become fragmented, creating constant internal conflict.
And believe me, this isn't just some ancient idea about stone idols. The source points out that this idea is alive and well today. Think about it. When we give ultimate, independent power to our career ambitions, or to making money, or even to a purely materialistic view of science, from this perspective, those become our modern idols, and they absolutely demand our servitude.
Okay, so that brings us to the human element in all this. If freedom is really about aligning with this divine oneness, where does our choice, our free will, even fit in? Well, turns out it's right at the heart of it all, and it starts with this kind of paradoxical view of human nature.
The source material describes humanity as this walking contradiction. On one hand, we've got this spark of the divine within us, this incredible capacity for greatness. But on the other hand, we're flawed. We're totally capable of messing up. So what makes the difference? Choice. The freedom to choose to acknowledge that higher reality leads to growth. But choosing to reject it, which is described here as rejecting a truth you already know deep down, that's what leads to a fall.
This is why knowledge is absolutely crucial. Knowledge is the very thing that empowers a person to see reality clearly, to make a conscious, informed choice to align with that single unifying truth. So you see, in this view, real free will isn't blind, it's guided by knowledge.
So, we've talked about the individual and the spiritual side, but how does this all work in the real world of politics and society? This is where things get really fascinating, because you run right into that classic tension between individual liberty and the need for the community to be stable and secure.
The source traces a pretty clear historical evolution. You start with the prophetic model, where the Prophet Muhammad was both a spiritual guide and a political leader. It was all rolled into one. After him, you get the caliphal model, and that authority starts to become more of a political, administrative function. And then later, under Abbasid rule, it shifts again into a much more centralized and sometimes autocratic system of government.
So in this political framework, what was a ruler's number one job? Well, interestingly, the top priority wasn't to be a perfect moral role model. It was to maintain the law and protect the community. The stability of the whole group was considered more important than the ruler's personal piety. And this quote from the source really drives that point home. It suggests a historical tendency to prefer a strong leader, even a ruthless one, if they could guarantee stability. That's because protecting the entire community from chaos was seen as the ultimate goal.
All right, let's bring all these different threads together. We've looked at the spiritual foundation, the societal context. So how does this all reframe our understanding of freedom? Well, it fundamentally shifts the definition from being about license to being about liberation.
And this slide right here captures the core difference perfectly. The common modern view tends to see freedom as freedom to, the freedom to do whatever I want, whenever I want. But the perspective we're exploring from our source frames it as freedom from illusion, freedom from falsehood, and freedom from being a slave to anything other than God.
So the ultimate takeaway is this. True freedom, in this view, isn't found in having limitless choices. It's found in liberation, in the hard work of freeing yourself from your own inner conflicts and all those worldly attachments. It's only by doing that you can align with a single divine reality. And that right there is the paradox we started with. In this view, the ultimate act of freedom is actually submission to the ultimate truth. So I'll leave you with a final thought to chew on. How does this perspective, viewing freedom not as the power to do whatever you want, but as the liberation from all the internal and external things that enslave us, how does that challenge, or maybe even enrich, your own idea of what it means to be truly free?